And, Coach, you've made some changes. You have 2 new coordinators, so I want to ask you about that first. Let's start with offense and Andy Kotelnicki, who came over from Kansas. I had a chance to visit with him on the phone for about an hour last month. He's incredibly impressive. Really enjoyed the conversation. What do you like about what he brings philosophically that made you feel like this was the right fit for you?
Well, a couple things. I've been following his career for a long time. We played him when they were at Buffalo. Love his head coach, Lance. I just think they've done a really good job. And I think the big thing for us is explosive plays. We did some really good things last year offensively, but we were not explosive enough. And if you studied Kansas, not only were they explosive, but they did it a ton of different ways. Run game, pass game, quarterback run game, a lot of different things that make it really difficult and challenging to defend. And then I think the good thing is, he didn't need to take the job. We spent a lot of time getting to know him. He spent a lot of time getting to know us, making sure it's the right fit, because we also are at a point as a program we'll need to start from scratch. Like, what are the things that can stay the same? What are the things that need to change?
I want to ask you about Tom Allen as well, someone Jerry and I have gotten to know a ton through the years and really, really like and respect. I always think it's interesting, and you were kind of saying this with Andy too, so maybe there's more similarities here than I would imagine. But when you hire someone who you have competed against,
yep,
that's always a tip of the cap to while they do something that gives us challenge and that troubles us in terms of preparing for them. So what were the things that Tom has done that made you think, wow, this is a guy who I'd want running my defense?
Well, I think a couple things, right? I think the first thing, obviously, 7 years head coaching experience in our conference. There's a lot of value that comes from that. On top of that, defensive guy. On top of that, attacking style front. Like, for us, we've been really good. I've been fortunate that literally all the way back to Vanderbilt, we've had a top 10 defense really our entire time at Penn State under 3 different coordinators. So we needed to make sure that we found the right guy, again, that didn't want to reinvent the wheel, that would come in and study us and say, okay, what can stay the same, and then what can we tweak and change that I'm going to be comfortable running the defense. So it was crazy. It literally was like a 2-week interview. Came out during bowl prep. I had 2 hours to spend with him. We interviewed. I was like, hey, I need a little bit more time with you. You'll stay tomorrow. The next day, hey, got another 2 hours. Can you stay? And literally, he was there for like 2 weeks. He was able to study us, our program. Was he comfortable? Because he didn't need to take a job. Right. So it really was a really good opportunity for me to spend a ton of time with him, make sure he was the right fit for Penn State, and the same thing for him. And I think that has allowed him to really hit the ground running. And then, Coach, as you know, you're able to kind of get back to doing why you got into the game in the first place. Coaching ball, coaching defense, without all the other stuff that I still got to deal with. He's focused on the things that we love about the game.
Going back to offense, so being more explosive, getting the ball to your best players, is that which contributes the most? Scheme, play calling, personality? I mean, what makes that happen, as you say, with basically the same players? And you did some things like that last year.
Yes.
All
those things, yeah. I think,
but what's the most important one? Is it when you call the play? Is it the player? Is it the scheme?
I don't think it's one thing. It's like most things in life. It's a combination of all those things. It's, as you know, as a play caller, in my opinion, there's about 4 to 6 plays a game that are really going to determine and dictate that game. That's when you know you got a great defense coordinator, offensive coordinator, because he can maximize those moments. But it's also, everybody understands, you got to get the ball to your best players. That's like coaching 101. But a lot of times it doesn't happen. So making sure guys that are committed to doing that, and the thing with him, he's been an offensive coordinator for over 19 years. So it's not like I got to guess. I could study all those things. Were those things happening on a consistent basis? And for us, it's a combination of all those things together.
Kansas last year among the best in the nation in terms of shifts and motions, just changing the picture on a defense. Curious if it's that or other elements of this offense will allow you and him to accentuate all the talents that Drew Aller has. And we know he's pure, but what else does he have in the tank that this offense is going to elevate?
Well, I think a couple things. I think, first of all, the motions and the shifts are great, right? But what I think he does a really good job of, you want to cause stress to the defense, but what you're always trying to do is how can I make it as simple as possible for the quarterback? How can I make it as simple as possible for the offensive line? You do all that motion and shifting, you ID the front, and then all of a sudden, the last second, the front changes and somebody's unaccounted for in a scheme. So how do you do the motioning and shifting that creates a stress for defense but doesn't cause it for the offense? That's where I think he's brilliant. The other thing is being able to have a little bit of the things that we all know cause stress. Option causes stress. Is Drew Lamar? No, he's not Lamar. But if you watched him last year, he made more plays with his legs than you would think. Just having those things in your system as a threat that the defense has to account for, that's where I think Andy's done a really good job. It's the play action pass, it's the RPO, it's the motions and shifts. He does a little bit of all these things, and that's what makes him so difficult to defend.
What's the biggest challenge, replacing an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator?
Well, the other thing is I've replaced all three. Actually, we said two.
Special
new
teams.
Offense coordinator, new defense coordinator. Nobody ever wants to talk about special teams coordinator. That matters too. I think the biggest thing is fit in both directions, right? And when I talk about fit, I'm not just talking about cultural fit. I'm talking about scheme fit. When you talk about year 11, we're not in a position to be starting over. We're also not in a position where we can say we're going to take the preseason to work through the kinks. There are no preseason. So that's the biggest thing, is making sure that we got somebody that makes sense for us right now and can hit the ground running.
As a head coach, do you find yourself doing more X's and O's during the offseason because you hired two new guys?
Yeah, because, again, I think at the end of the day, I got to make sure that it's right, and that all the things we talked about during the interview process you're actually doing. Because during the interview process, they tell you whatever you want to get the job. Well, let's do these things. And then also just to go back, okay, at the end of the day, although we're hiring Andy because he did some special things and Tom because he'd done some special things, also part of the interview process is we can't recreate the wheel. What are you comfortable keeping the same so one guy can learn a few new things, not 50?
Right.
Coach, you referenced the interview process. You did that over 11 years ago, and now you're here at Media Day. You're like a true vet. With that said, what do you remember about your first one here? Because there's three guys that are their first Big Ten Media Days. And then I'm also curious about, for you, when you look at the state of the game, you've seen so much in your time as a player to D2 school all the way to now. How do you assess it?
Well, first of all, it's somewhat sad that 11 years now is like the exception. You know, that's really changed in college football. But I think all the way back to my first SEC Media Day, if I remember correctly, I was matched up with Coach Saban. It was me as a first-year coach at Vanderbilt and Nick Saban at Alabama. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Some lady was trying to get Nick to sign her baby. I think, it's like that was chaotic. And then obviously now here in the Big Ten for 11 years, it's been great. I've met a ton of really good personalities as coaches, in terms of media personalities, Big Ten staff. It's just been first class from the time I've joined the league to the end, and then to see the new 4 teams that have been added to our conference that you're more familiar with than anybody. I think that's exciting for our fan base. We got Washington in the whiteout. We got to go to USC in the Coliseum. Those things are even more challenging when you're at Penn State. With our airport and our travel, as you guys know, it's not an easy place to get to or get out of. So challenges and also excitement.
Coach, my first SEC meeting, some of the old coaches got off on a tangent, started talking about tractors. That they were using on
the Brooklyn guy wants to be more.
Yeah, they looked at you. You didn't add stuff. Well, on that note, I remember being at a meeting and everybody was talking about private planes and how they had 2 pilots and how excited they were that their AD had 2 pilots in a private plane. I said I've always had private planes or 2 pilots when I was at Vanderbilt because I was flying Southwest, literally, as the head coach, literally. Yeah, flying Southwest.
That is good. All right, so our friends in Seattle, they've been asking me, like, how do you choose the whiteout? What made you choose Washington for that game? Yeah,
so it's obviously a combination between myself and the AD and then also working with the Big Ten. It's become a little bit more challenging because in the old days, the perception of a primetime game was always at night, right? well, we'd love the whiteout game to be at white. That's what at night. That's what our fans expect. Well, now with Fox and our partnership with them, a lot of your primetime games are out 12 o'clock. So how can we get what everybody wants, which is a big-time opponent at the right point in the season? It's going to make it easy for people to wear white rather than camo late in the season and staying warm in central Pennsylvania, right? And then also hopefully be a late afternoon or night game. So all those things kind of factored into it, and obviously it helps Washington playing in the national championship game last year, big opponent.
Coach, I have a sneaking suspicion I know the answer to this question, but how do you feel about life in a division-less Big Ten?
Well, what I did love is I did love the conversations for 11 years. Well, coaches, don't worry about it. Over history, it always balances itself out. I never saw it balance itself out. That never
College
really
football is
happened.
never balanced out.
Exactly.
It's not a balanced sport.
They kept telling us. I said, let me see the data. Let me see the data on that one.
The other big change is 12-team playoff. And when you go through the history and you go through the data, there's no team that would have benefited from that more in this recent time period than Penn State. So what does it mean to be in that 12-team playoff world and to be one of the teams that people are talking about as being a favorite to get there?
Yeah, I think, for us, we've been talking a lot to our team about understanding the difference of a possible 17-game season. Like, you better understand what that means. And then not only, okay, what do we got to do to get into the playoffs, but what can we do to get into the playoffs and be in an advantageous situation, a bye week one, or whether it's a home game in Beaver Stadium to start this season. You want to put yourself in the best position possible to not just make the playoffs, but put yourself in an advantageous situation so you can go be successful in the playoffs.
You got a really big first game against West Virginia. This is not unusual for you to open with really good opponents. So you've been opening with Power 5 opponents, I guess 5 times in the last 7 years. How does it change the tenor of camp, especially given that it's a rivalry game, given all the focus that's going to be on this game, to have one of that magnitude right off the bat?
Yeah, I think it's good. As you guys know, you've been to Morgantown. It's a hornet's nest. I mean, they take a lot of pride in their football team. They got no pro team. It's all about West Virginia. It's all about Morgantown. So it'll be a great environment to play in. I was fortunate to play there a bunch when I was at the University of Maryland. We've played games like this opening at Auburn a few years ago. Even our at Purdue game was a great game to open the season. So I think our guys understand what it's about. This isn't the NFL where you get a chance to work the kinks out. We got to be playing well from week one, and there's a handful of those games across the country. But we've embraced it, and we're excited about it. And from a historical perspective, whether it's Pitt or whether it's West Virginia, there's great history with those opponents, too.
Should be an amazing scene. Really looking forward to watching Penn State this season. Always appreciate your time. Thanks,
Coach.
Coach.
Guys. Appreciate you.
Coach.